You know what? I did not know that on the board.
Yeah, it's not letting me. It's not letting me expand just that one screen. As soon as I say expand, I'm getting just this one. That's all right.
And I thought, well, you know, my sister
I've known him for so long, he and I went to Kelly together. Yeah.
Okay, so are we unmuted? We're,
That's my hometown.
okay, we're getting,
Yeah.
we're going to unmute.
My mother went to college.
Do you know who else is?
Okay, and Kevin's parents just looked out for me.
You're good.
This is stuck again.
Well, it's not supposed to be you. It's you, and then we go to the PowerPoint.
Welcome, everyone. We want to welcome you to our first Senate Bill 1 webinar of the year. This webinar is planned and presented by people from the Council on Post-Secondary Education, the Kentucky Department of Education, and the Educational Professional Standards Board. We have all of you muted that are listening, so in order for you to participate, we will have to ask that you type your questions in. We are also recording this webinar, so it's very important that we keep everyone, the mutations to deviations to a minimum so that everyone can rewatch it. We are going to ask that you use that chat feature for questions, and at the end of our webinar today, we do have a few minutes planned for some questions that we can respond to. There are some handouts that we reference during this webinar. Those will be sent to all of the education preparation programs tomorrow or later today, and they will be posted on an SB1 page website on the Educational Professional Standards Board's website as soon as we get our new website up and running. So just be aware that we will have a page where we will put links and postings for you to help you keep updated. The other thing that I did want to say up front in terms of housekeeping is that this webinar does take the requirement for faculty of the teacher preparation institutions and this new staff, and it will suffice for our fall update this year. So once you participate in this webinar, you just notify your EPP and they notify us in turn so that we get the reports from all of our universities and faculty. But welcome today, and we do want to introduce the participants so that you can see them. I'm Eve Prophet, and I'm a project specialist here at EPSB. Sitting next to me is Sue Kane, and Sue is with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Someone that you don't see, unless she steps in front of the camera, is Melissa Bell, and Melissa is with us from the Council on Post-Secondary Education. And she is monitoring your questions that you post on chat, and we will use those at the end. Also, someone else that you don't see from the Educational Professional Standards Board is Ben Boggs, and Ben is the director of our teacher preparation unit here at the Educational Professional Standards Board, and he's ready for questions as well. From our partners at the Kentucky Department of Education, we have Jennifer Fraker, and Jennifer's from the Office of Teaching and Learning. Next to her, we have Michael Hackworth, and Michael is from the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And last but not least, we have Chase Bannister, and Chase is with the Office of Career and Technical Education. So as we are going to disappear off of your screen now, and we're going to just go and use our PowerPoint presentations so that we can move those and you can participate with us. The purpose of this isn't working, but you'll take care of it, I'm sure. The purpose of our seminar today is that you receive information about the origin of Senate Bill 1, 2009. You will also receive updates from the Kentucky Department of Education about what is happening with the status of the Senate Bill 1, 2017 implementation. And you will also receive information from the Council on Post-Secondary Education regarding what are the implications of this whole Senate bill initiative for higher education faculty. This is a direct statement from Senate Bill 1, 2009, and it does set the standard for all of us working in teacher preparation. It says that the Educational Professional Standards Board, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and the Kentucky Department of Education will coordinate information and training sessions for faculty and staff in all of the teacher preparation programs in use of the revised content standards. It also says that EPSB will ensure that our teacher preparation programs prepare our teacher interns to have experience in planning classroom instruction, particularly around these revised standards. So that's from the original language of Senate Bill 1, 2009. This bill further goes forth and states that, in the next slide, that CPE will work with the Kentucky Department of Education and post-secondary education institutions to ensure that faculty who teach in the various content areas also have knowledge of the content standards. So this goes a little bit further beyond even our teacher preparation programs. And finally, the last section that's very important for us to understand is that we do have to connect with the Office of Career and Technical Education because we have to follow and carry out any requirements in that whole arena as it relates to teacher preparation. So as we go forth to the next part, Sue King is going to talk with us about the history of Senate Bill 1 and its connection to Senate Bill 1, 2017. So Sue, would you share with us, please?
Absolutely, and welcome again to the webinar. Senate Bill 1, 2009 and Senate Bill 1, 2017 are really a part of Kentucky's educational reform efforts. So we're known in the nation as being reformers in the education arena. This is a tremendous part of that. Senate Bill 1, 2009 emphasized the need for creating a set of academic standards and their related assessments that represented high-quality, internationally benchmarked standards that aligned with college and career readiness as students graduated from high school and moved forward either into the workplace or into college. Senate Bill 1, 2017 moves this effort forward, especially in college and career readiness, and career readiness is especially emphasized there, and those transitions from high school. And you'll see that a little later as we talk about the new accountability model that is being put forth by the Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you very much for that overview. After all of this information comes out, can you share with us an overview of its impact on students and our teacher preparation programs? What does this mean for our institutions?
Let me just give a little more background on Senate Bill 1, 2009. It was a historical act in our state and was unanimously approved by all members of Kentucky's legislature. Senate Bill 1 specified the need for KDE and CPE to work together to create a set of standards that align with the expectations of high school graduates to those expectations that our colleges and universities have. And we did not want our students to have any need of remediation. So in that process, over 100 Kentucky faculty from content and teacher preparation programs and similar groups of integrated K-12 and post-secondary faculty came together to review numerous drafts of the academic standards that were being proposed prior to their adoption. Kentucky was the very first state in the nation to adopt this set of standards, known then as, and known currently as the Kentucky, then it was known as the Kentucky Core Academic Standards, since as the Kentucky Academic Standards. K-12, post-secondary, and adult education, and this is a key point here, adopted this one set of standards to make a statement about the expectations at both K-12 and post-secondary levels. Assessments were adopted that promoted the common standards of readiness, and a common set of indicators or benchmarks of readiness were adopted by the Kentucky Department of Education, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, the Education Professional Standards Board, and the Kentucky Adult Education System. So we have an aligned set of expectations and an aligned set of assessments. Post-secondary faculty and secondary and education partners also developed a second piece that was a part of Senate Bill 1, 2009, and that was a unified strategy. Not only did we adopt this high-level agreement about aligned standards and assessment, but we had a strategy in place that promoted college and career readiness. And in June 2010, Kentucky Department of Education and the Council adopted these 4 unified strategies for increasing readiness for both college and the workplace, but they were especially looking at transitions to college. The first one, and perhaps one that you've learned a lot about recently, is increasing accelerated learning opportunities for all Kentucky students, and I emphasize the word all. This was through the opportunity and access to programs like dual credit, advanced placement, international baccalaureate credit, or other forms that gave students college credit while in high school. The second strategy was around targeted interventions for students during high school who had not met college and career readiness benchmarks that had been set by our agencies. And those targeted interventions that occurred mostly during the senior year of high school have been extremely successful. Improving college and career readiness from, depending what year you want to start, from 42% of high school graduates college and career ready in 2014 to over 68% successful in 2016. So this has been going on. The work has been going on since 2010, and we've made great strides through targeted intervention. The third area was increasing access to and quality of college and career readiness advising. Advising more students about college, how to apply to college, completing the financial aid forms, the responsibilities of readiness. So the College and Career Readiness Advising Program have really made great differences through a project called Operation Preparation. The fourth and final part of that unified strategy was increasing college completion rates, especially among those students who transitioned from high school to college and had not met our benchmarks of readiness. And we've been increasing their completion rates for credentials and degrees through things like bridge programming, supplemental courses, some new work that we've been doing in developmental education reform. But all of those efforts have made differences in what we're seeing in terms of retention and graduation rates. That will come. We will have our first data about that in 2018-19. And then finally, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, along with our partners at the Education Professional Standards Board, created a series of workshops and online modules specifically for those in our teacher preparation programs and the content area, usually in arts and sciences, that created an understanding of the impact of Senate Bill 1, these new academic standards, the new assessments, and how to prepare future teachers to create assessments that demonstrated understanding of these academic standards, and then the measures being used for college and career readiness. This work with teacher preparation and content faculty continues in a new form as we work to create an understanding of the revision of Senate Bill 1 in 2017 And you'll notice that there's this common theme of Senate Bill 1. It's very important, if anything gets a designation of 1 as a bill in our Kentucky legislation. But this has been about education. The result of all this work has been a unique collaboration of the state's education and workforce agencies that has been a national model for creating an architecture for readiness. College and career readiness rates have increased, as I said, and the work of our teachers and faculty have truly impacted the success of our students transitioning to a workplace.
Thank you very much, Sue. That was just a really quick overview. We do have links and handouts and things that we will make available later. But we're now going to transition to our Office of Teaching and Learning and ask Jennifer Fragert, who works in that office, to talk with us about the current status of the Kentucky academic standards. And we know that they originally started as what people still sometimes call Common Core standards, but we really need some information about updates on Kentucky academic standards.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. Senate Bill 1 actually set forth a standards review process, and this process really codifies many of the things that the Kentucky Department of Education already does as part of this. One thing that's new to the process is a 10-member standards and assessments process review committee. This committee is really just for the review of the process itself. So while KBE still has the final say as to adopting standards, this group just looks at the process the standards review underwent to ensure compliance with the law and/or best practices. Also included, as Heath was saying, in the bill was a requirement to repeal Common Core ELA and math standards. But please remember that existing standards remain in place until new ones are approved by the KBE. So that brings us to, so where are we? What's going on? So hopefully you can see this on your screen. There's a timeline in front of you, and we'll take a few minutes to kind of walk through this timeline of when things will be reviewed and updated. So beginning this school year, 2017-18, because again, Common Core ELA and math are repealed, we'll begin with ELA and math standards. There's been a call for teacher reviewers at this point and even public review of those standards. In addition to the physical activity, health, and career study standards, formerly known as the practical living and career standards. So our office of the Office of Teaching and Learning has actually been deliberate about kind of teasing out those standards and calling them what they are. So in other words, physical activity and health will be specifically named going forward. In addition to, and you've seen probably there was a press release this week about the development of computer science standards. So which brings us to 2018-19. And then we kind of transition into the implementation of standards. So the implementation of the ELA and math and physical activity, health, and computer science standards. But then we also began the development and review of social studies, world language, and library and media, otherwise known as technology standards. Going into 2019-20, the implementation then of ELA and math assessments, as well as the implementation of the revised social studies standards and world language and library and media standards. So then looking at 2020-21, we have the implementation of the revised social studies assessments, and then the beginning of the science standards revision process. Looking forward then at 2021 and 2022, which seems so far away, but just around the corner, is the classroom then implementation of the revised science standards and the beginning of the art standards revision process. And rounding it off to 2022 and 23 is the implementation of the revised science assessments and the implementation of the revised art standards. So then the process then begins over, and that kind of sets the stage for the tiered revision process.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that update on the academic standards. And we will just ask everyone to stay tuned in, because anytime there's revision of standards going on in the assessment process, we will try to keep you updated on that. Jennifer, one more thing that I know our institutions of teacher preparation are very interested in is that teacher evaluation system. Everyone's heard that it's gone. What happened to our Danielson framework? So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Oh, such a great question and a super hot topic, isn't it? So Senate Bill 1, as we know, it actually called for the elimination of the professional growth and effectiveness system, or otherwise known as PGS. but it's really only eliminated in so much as the data requirements of districts submitting information to KDE. However, the legislative intent behind Senate Bill 1 was to really encompass the Kentucky framework for teaching, or the Danielson framework. So again, tied to that, really looking to give flexibility to districts so that districts can choose the system, but keeping in mind that districts have to align their plans to this framework that KDE is actually in the beginning processes of developing and refining. So the proposed revisions are contained within the regulation that replaces PGES, but proposes what's known as the Kentucky Framework for Personnel Evaluation. So these proposed changes actually went before the Kentucky Board of Education for a first reading on August 3rd. So again, very, very beginning stages. But if you're interested, we've included a link, or you can go out to the KDE media portal, say that a couple times quickly, sorry, and access what's been said about that. So in other words, stay tuned for more information.
Thank you, Jennifer. And just so that our listening audience is very aware, the Education Professional Standards Board is keeping KTIP in place. We know that it is built on the framework, and we will be working alongside as changes are made, but just know that this year we have kept our framework, the KTIP model in place. So keep working with it as you go. We're going to move forward now, and Michael Hackworth from the Office of Assessment and Accountability is going to provide us some updates about assessment. So Michael, my first question for you is, what is in place this year for assessments in 2017-18? What are we looking at in schools and for this coming year?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Eve. As Eve mentioned earlier in our session, there will be several documents that will be posted on the EPSB website and sent out to you. And two of the graphs and charts that I have will be shared, but I'll be happy to go through these today. The first thing I'd like to share with you is the 2017-18 testing at a glance, looking at what will be tested this year and at what grade levels. So if you look at this chart that we have created in our office, in the first left column, you've got your content areas, and in the second half of it, you've got your high school assessments. Across the top row, you have your grade levels at which assessments are given. So let's take a moment to go through this and look at when specific content is tested. Reading and mathematics is tested at grades 3 through 8. Science, 4 and 7. Social studies, 5 and 8. And on-demand writing will be once at grade span, elementary, grade 5, middle, grade 8, and high school, grade 11. A new test this year that we will field test will be the editing and mechanics test, and that will also be with grades 5, 8, and 11. Then we move into our high school exams. One of the exams that students will take this year is the college admissions examination. And if you notice in Senate Bill 1, it calls for an assessment to be given at grades 10 and 11. Well, Kentucky currently is under contract with ACT this year, and we will test all juniors with the ACT in the spring, which will be in March. So there will be no grade 10 test this year, but that will be in the future. We are also currently working on creating an RFP that will go out, and it will go out for bids on the new college admissions exam for school years such as 2018, 19, and beyond. But for this year, and we've had a lot of questions on this, what will students take? They will take the ACT in March, the spring of 2018. Then there are 4 EOC assessments. In the past, students have taken an ACT end of course quality core test in English 2, Algebra 2, and Biology, along with U.S. History. This year, these assessments are going to be aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, and the assessments have to be created by Kentucky educators. So they will no longer be tested from ACT Quality Core. These will be tests that are written by Kentucky educators, and we've already had a lot of work this summer on test construction. U.S. history will not be tested this year. Once the standards are revised for U.S. history, then we will work on creating a field test. And I do want to say the other 3 tests, English 2, Algebra 2, and Biology, are field tested this year. So that's kind of what our testing looks like this year.
Thank you, Michael, and I know that our faculty are going to be very interested in this whole accountability system and the alignment to the standards, because that's going to be the piece that our teachers need to understand. Yeah, just this week on Wednesday, August the 23rd, the State Board of Education unanimously adopted the new accountability system. What can you share with us about that accountability system?
I'll be happy to. It's a very exciting time in Kentucky. A lot of work has happened over the last year and a half. We have been involved with a lot of shareholders, and over actually 6,000 people have been involved in this process to create this new accountability system. And what I'm just going to talk to you briefly about today are the key goals, the indicators that you will find in the proposed system, and specifically look at one of the indicators of transition readiness. So our key goals, there are 5. The key goals of the accountability system are to promote higher levels of student learning and achievement. There's a very big focus on reducing achievement gaps throughout the state and ensuring equity. Establishing opportunity and access for students to receive a high-quality education. Build a culture of high expectations and continuous improvement within our schools. And to communicate a clear and honest understanding of strengths and opportunities for schools and districts. And as I just said a minute ago, there are 7 indicators within this new system that will eventually all come together, where schools and districts will receive a 1 to a 5-star rating. The indicators that make up the system are proficiency, which would be proficiency towards your reading, writing, and mathematics assessments. There is a separate academic indicator that brings in your content areas of science and social studies. We have growth. This is focused on growth in reading and mathematics, and growth will only be determined at the elementary and middle school levels. Achievement gap closure, we are going to look at gap to group, how groups are comparing to one another, and then gap to proficiency. Transition readiness, elementary, middle, and high. Last year and a few years before, under Unbridled Learning, we had a college and career readiness chart, and that was specifically focusing on high school students. So this new accountability model focuses on transition readiness, and that is transition from elementary to middle, middle to high, high school and beyond, whether it is the workforce, whether it's post-secondary education. So there's always that transition piece at those marks throughout a student's educational career. We have graduation rate, which of course would be high school, and then opportunity and access that has things like rich curriculum, whole child support, equitable access, and school quality and safety for our students. What I would like to do now is really look into the transition readiness component, because it really leads into what some of the things the Office of Career and Technical Education had to say today. So when we look at transition readiness, again, I said earlier, it's at elementary, middle, and high school. Elementary and middle is different from high school. If you look, elementary and middle school is meeting a benchmark on a composite score that combines student performance on reading, writing, mathematics, science, and social studies. Now, this composite score will be given at the end of grade 5 and grade 8 for those subject areas. We do not know what the benchmark is at this time. There's still some work to be done in the new system, but that is what transition readiness will look like at the elementary and middle school level. Then when we get to high school, we have a nice chart that has been developed, and this chart will also come out to you and will be posted on the EPSB website. But as you can see at the very top of it, the first thing in order for a student to earn transition readiness is they have to have that Kentucky high school diploma, okay, meeting the minimum requirements of the state and the district that student goes to school in. Then from there, they have the opportunity to become academic ready, career ready, or military ready. So looking at what it takes to be academic ready, we have in this column meeting benchmarks determined by the Council of Post-Secondary Education on a college admissions exam, or a grade of B or better on 6 or more hours of ABE approved dual credit, or a score of 3+ on exams at least 2 or more AP courses, or a score of 5 on at least 2 or more IB exams, or benchmarks on at least 2 or more Cambridge Advanced International examinations. So right now, you know, KDE will actually be collaborating with CPE in the near future on making it, you know, a combination of these measures. You know, maybe a student can complete 1 AP and then 1 dual credit, but that is still a little bit of work that needs to be done. But KDE will be collaborating with CPE on combining these measures. On the career readiness, you have benchmarks on an industry certification that has been proved by KWIB, or earning an industry certification that is aligned to an articulated agreement. So you first have to get one of those two, and then there is an and. So if you earn industry certification, then you're ready to move on to the and part of the column. Or if you earn a COSA, you're ready to move on to the and part of this column. And this and column consists of, you know, having a score of a B or better on 6+ hours of approved career and technical education CTE dual credit courses, or completing 2 CTE credits and enrolling in the 3rd credit in a CTE program of study, you know, given that student preparatory status, or KDE labor cabinet approved apprenticeships, which are a lot of our track program apprenticeships, and, I'm sorry, not and, or, that was not fault, but or KDE approved alternate processes to verify exceptional work experience. So there's kind of 2 halves to that column. You have 2 ors at the top, and then you have an and then you have some other choices that you have to meet through those ors. And then our 3rd column is on military readiness, and we've had a lot of questions regarding military readiness in our office. The transition readiness piece for military readiness is, you know, you have to have that high school diploma. You need to meet benchmarks on the ASVAB, which will remain a 50 AFQT, and you can enlist in a branch of military service or complete 2 certificates of training and enroll in the 3rd credit within a JROTC program. So there is a little option down after earning that 50 on that ASVAB AFQT. And then for our English language learners, in order for them to be considered transition readiness, they have to, you know, meet English proficiency. They have to, you know, be reclassified and be taken, you know, out of those services that they received, since they are now English language proficient. They would need to earn a high school diploma and then meet one of the other criteria, such as academic, career, or military readiness. So again, you will have a copy of this transition readiness chart for you to use at a later date.
Thank you, Michael. And as he indicates, transition's changing, so we need to keep up with what transition means. And as we work with our elementary teachers, our middle school teachers, and our high school teachers, they need to be very knowledgeable of all these different technical aspects. Now we're going to move on to our Office of Career and Technical Education, and Chase Bannister is going to share information with us there. Chase, welcome. And first question is, when will practical living and career study standards be revised? Where is that in all of this?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having KDE as a part of this webinar. As far as practical living and career studies standards work, that will begin before the end of the 2017 year and will carry on through the 2018 year, and we will be finished before the end of 2018. Senate Bill 1 incentivizes students to pursue career pathways and take industry certification exams and credential and licensure exams. As Michael highlighted, the industry certification list is a list that is approved by your local workforce investment boards, and then is ultimately approved by the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board, and then is disseminated by the Kentucky Department of Education using data from the Kentucky Center for Education and Workforce Statistics. Senate Bill 1 also requires the Kentucky Board of Education to promulgate regulations establishing the performance-based experience eligibility requirements and weighted reimbursement amounts, and this work on that regulation will begin soon.
Good, and we had Michael sharing with us the accountability a moment ago. What is the accountability in the CTE program?
Well, Michael highlighted the different elements there that would go into your career readiness piece and your military readiness piece, which touch on the career and technical education aspects of the accountability model. But I will just add that the new system is going to emphasize career exploration, career counseling, attainment of those industry certificates, lots of work-based learning experiences, and dual or articulated credit. And I'll just add in here that Michael touched on the earning a COSA as appropriate for articulated credit, and currently we have 12 articulated credit agreements that are linked to those COSA assessments. So KDE is continuing to work on establishing those dual credit agreements and articulated credit opportunities for our students.
And I'd ask our higher education folks to keep listening, because we keep using this word dual credit, and that has lots of implications for us in higher education. Another question for you, Chase, is can you share an update currently for us on changes being made to the career pathways?
Yes. So, well, I'll just start off by saying that in 2017 and 2018, the program of studies is currently available on the KDE website, and there will be no pathway changes for the 2018-2019 school year. However, the Office of Career and Technical Education is in the midst of a 2-year project to evaluate career pathways, the programs of study, and all related documentation in an effort to provide improved documentation to support the effective implementation of high-quality CTE programs. We sort of pushed the pause button on the current pathway system in order to establish a framework for career pathways that relies on labor market information and high demand sectors to drive pathway changes and program of studies changes. The intent of this project is to structure a framework that provides a systemic approach to the development and implementation of high quality career and technical education pathways. As you all know, economic growth is dependent on the availability of a skilled workforce. This project is to ensure that all career and technical education pathways are in alignment with identified business and industry needs and driven by industry recognized standards and certifications. So the project will produce clear expectations, processes, and timelines associated with identified deliverables.
Thank you very much, Chase. Now we're going to move back and look at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. And Sue, would you share with us, please, what the Council on Post-Secondary Education's landscape for colleges and universities will be as we move forward?
Yes, I'll be happy to. The post-secondary landscape all moves around a strategic agenda that was passed in 2016, but is a plan over the next 5 years, from 2016 to 2021. And within that plan, you'll see some strategies and objectives related to dual credit. How many times have you heard dual credit today? There's also, at the post-secondary level, developmental education reform. We'll talk about remediation in just a bit. Then pathways, you've heard a lot about the pathways in career and technical education that were regionally needed within the workforce sector. And then our funding model. There's a new funding model for post-secondary education, and I know many of you have interest in that. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those. The strategic agenda specifically has 3 focus areas. Those areas are opportunity, which is about encouraging more students to take advantage of post-secondary education opportunities for both credentials and degrees, not just degree, but credentials and degrees that are meaningful in our workforce and beyond. The second area is success, and that is once students enter our post-secondary education programs, we want them to increase degree and certificate completion, fill any workforce shortages that are there, and guide more graduates to a career path. So these are very targeted pieces within the strategic agenda, and you will see that as you review. There's a slide later on making sure that you can view that plan. The third and probably most important piece of the strategic agenda, there's great strategies in the other 2, but it is how can Kentucky's post-secondary system create economic and growth and development and make our state more prosperous. So that's a huge area that we are looking to, and strategies around building those component parts that drive economics and growth in our state. A next area that you've heard quite a bit about that I just want to give a few updates on is dual credit. Dual credit was a part of our accelerated learning opportunities through the Unified Strategy for College and Career Readiness, but it's also connecting students to our colleges and universities. Dual credit, the dual credit policy was updated in June 2015 and approved by the Council of Post-Secondary Education Board. Each student has access through the policy to 3 career and technical education courses within defined career pathways and 3 broad-based general education courses that transfer through our general education transfer policy to any other college or university within the state, any other public college or university in the state. A part of the dual credit program the policy was creating an advisory council, and led by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. This advisory council provides oversight, guidance, and assessment for the implementation of the dual credit policy and programming that is made available to the students. This advisory council reviews access to dual credit. That's very important, making sure every student has access to dual credit programming, making sure any programming is affordable and to students and schools and districts. We need to make sure that the credit that's offered through our dual credit programming is transferable to other programs of study in the case of career and technical education, and to any other college and university through our general education coursework made available. Probably most exciting related to dual credit was in June 2016, Governor Bevin, through executive orders, established a dual credit scholarship program that gave each high school senior access to 2 free dual credit courses. That program has been immensely successful. It was established through an executive order, but then was codified in form of a state statute in March 2017. And the 2017 statute just allowed for a more efficient flow of funding for the 2017 and beyond academic years. The cost of dual credit is quite important. It's limited to 1/3 of the KCTCS per credit hour rate. There's no allowance for course fees. The students would only be responsible, or schools and districts responsible for the cost of books. So it's been tremendously responsible. We've seen increases of about 38% in the number of students who are participating in dual credit programs as a result of the work on policy and the scholarship program. A second area that we're looking at very closely in post-secondary education, and it's happening in some form on all of our post-secondary campuses, is developmental education reform. You'll hear the term co-requisite models a lot on campuses. The goal is certainly to have more students successfully complete gateway courses that are linked, this is a critical piece, linked to their programs of study, and then go on to complete credentials and degrees that are aligned with our workforce needs. In this effort, the goal was to accelerate the time to credential and degree completion and limit the cost and time that students were spending in remediation. And we were losing a lot of students in that pathway of our previous model. In the previous model, in the what we call the prerequisite developmental education model, students would have to take 2 or 3 courses before they even had access to a gateway course that they would need in their program of study for a credential or degree. And in the new model, the co-requisite model, the students have access to the credit-bearing course within ultimately their first or second semester of study. And they can complete that gateway course more efficiently and then move on with their program of study. So connecting these 2 pathways of study is very important. The Council on Post-Secondary Education has provided not scholarships, but we have provided funds to each of our campuses to promote the development and implementation of models of co-requisite education where the students do have greater access. We're seeing very promising results through these pilots, and for example, in mathematics, we've seen increases of 20 to 30% in one semester of completion of the gateway course in mathematics, and in English language arts, we've seen 10 to 20% increases in completion of those entry-level English 101, 100 courses. So we're very excited about what's happening in that reform effort. Oops. I apologize. We are also looking at gateway courses and making sure that pathways of study are connected to those gateway courses. And the goal here is, again, to simply enhance student credential and degree completion. So you're going to hear a lot more about pathways of study, quantitative reasoning pathways of study, literacy pathways of study, and so forth. The primary, another primary thing that we're doing is working with the funding model for colleges and universities. So in this final element that I'm going to talk about today, there are some essential elements associated with funding models. The primary objective of this new funding model for our colleges and universities is to help the Commonwealth reach the national average of college attainment, which is 65% by the year 2030. So we would love 100% of our population to have credentials and degree that are meaningful in the workforce and beyond, but anyway, that's the goal of the new performance funding model. To achieve this goal, the institutions must do the 3 following things. They must increase retention and progression of students, and that will increase funding to the campus. increase the number of degrees and credentials earned by all types of students. And then the third thing is growing the number of credentials and degrees that garner high salaries upon graduation. These include making sure that we emphasize the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and healthcare fields, and other wage high demand jobs that we will find. And finally, you've heard this before with information about the Kentucky Department of Education's accountability model, and that is to close achievement gaps by increasing the number of credentials and degrees that are earned by our low-income, minority, and underprepared students. So all of those things together become our work over the next 5 years, and we have great work to do and great promise in getting that work done.
Thank you, Sue. As you can have garnered from this past 15-minute discussion, there's a whole lot of implications for our higher educators as they go forward. One thing I do want to let you know is that we will send the PowerPoint to all of our higher education institutions later today. We have revised a few pieces as we've gone along. We will also provide handouts to them. Since our EPSB new website will not be up and running this month, we will put all of these documents and links and everything on the Senate Bill 1 page at that time. But we will continue to send information, keep our educator prep programs very much in alignment. I know Dr. Boggs works on that all the time and wants to hear from you. And I will ask Melissa and Dr. Boggs now, were there any outstanding questions from that were shared on the chat features?
Well, you actually addressed one about the materials, and the other is about the standards revision, the process, who will lead the process, and do we know, or can we share a little bit about the background of any of these team members?
Great question. As a matter of fact, I had written here that if you are interested in volunteering for the ELA and math, to do that by September 1, our Department of Education is wanting people to, and it's not just teachers, they're asking higher education folks who are the content experts to participate. But I'm going to move to Jennifer and let her do a little more explanation on that.
I think you summarized it really well, Eve. The KDE is responsible for establishing these committees, so 4 standards and assessment review committees, and then 12 advisory panels to advise and assist these standards groups. Specifically regarding each of the content areas, then SB1 does stipulate that teachers come from different grade bands, so from elementary, middle, high, and post-secondary, to comprise these groups. And in doing so, the KDE establishes a rubric and uses this rubric to evaluate those that apply for being a part of these committees.
Thank you. Was there any additional pieces to that question? I want to encourage our faculty members and our teacher preparation programs who are out there to give great consideration to joining in this review of standards. This year with the ELA and math, but also as we move forward with the world languages, the social sciences, science, and all those others. So keep up on this because they do want and invite members. Anything else that any of our participants have thought about that they would like to add to the comments at this time? Well, we sincerely thank everyone.
Oh, wait,
we got another question coming in.
Yes, we do.
I've got to remember patience.
Regarding the 3 options for high school transition readiness, what will happen to students who do not meet one of the readiness requirements? Is this for counting only, or will it have consequences for those students? Can you see that?
They actually would just not go into that transition readiness calculation for accountability purposes. If they don't earn one, they can still graduate. They just will not be in the overall transition readiness calculation.
That's the accountability system. The transition curricula and coursework within the senior year will still be available for the students to get ready if they have not met them by their senior year. So we will still have a model in which students during their senior year can become transition ready even in that senior year after those college admission tests have been administered.
We have another one.
Okay, we have another question.
So will students who choose a career path in 8th grade and find it is not for them be able to change their career path?
Okay, that question, I'm going to repeat it because I neglected to ask her to get to a mic. If you want to turn the one on closest to you, the mic, and repeat the question, please.
Well, can I
see it.
can I move it?
It won't move. Can't do it.
No, I can't actually see it
Oh,
and be at a mic at the same time.
Okay.
But can you see that, Eve?
Expand.
No, I'm lying. It asked about if a student, can they change career pathways was
There
the
you go.
gist of it. So again, we're going to reference to our KDE partners on that about how students can move in and out of career pathways.
So the question is, if a student chooses a career pathway in the 8th grade, will they be able to change that career pathway? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. They can certainly do that. And so most of our career pathways, as I think that Michael stated, are 4 courses, and so or 4 credits. And so so a student would need to start, by the appropriate time in order to be a completer in that pathway. But yes, they will be able to change career pathways if they don't feel that they're the one that fits them best.
Right, we felt like the flexibility would be there, but that's a good question. Melissa, I think we have another one, or a couple.
Yes, we do. When will the high school transition model take effect?
This year will be a transition year for Kentucky schools. The new accountability system will go into effect 2018-2019.
And we have a question about the military option. Have you connected with military recruiters about this option?
Yes, several people at the Department of Education have had meetings, the Office of Assessment and Accountability and the Office of Career and Technical Education. We met with certain recruiters last week and we discussed this.
Okay. If they are able to change, that needs to be communicated to the counselor in the high schools because, okay,
County. You're not county.
I'm not sure I understand.
It's a comment. It's a comment to the question two questions prior about changing after 8th grade.
Okay. They're just saying that the option to change should be relayed to the counselors.
That's a good point. I think sometimes we pick up information out from higher education as we're in and out of schools, and sometimes we're told things about, well, we can't do this or we can't do that. So keep in mind, folks, that our Department of Education is always wanting to be advised and tuned in to the issues that would be barriers for our students out there in the high schools. So please keep in touch with us. Sue, did you want to add to that?
Well, I wanted to add to the work on military. CPE is working closely with our colleges and universities to align work that occurs in the military and experiences in the military with college credit. So that work extends from high school through credential and degree at post-secondary level. That work on transfer is high priority at the council. So again, that's another piece of information that will be coming to you about what kind of military credit would transfer in for credit toward their pathway or degree, especially those who will become future educators.
Thank you. And we are at the end of our time. We will still welcome your questions and comments, and we want you to give those to us. When we send you the PowerPoint, all of our emails are there. Please do not hesitate whatsoever to contact one of us and continue to ask questions. To be honest with you, we really welcome that. That helps us clarify what your need for the knowledge is out in the field, and you're in the field for us. I do want to thank our panelists today. Melissa for being such a good facilitator of the questions. Sue for helping us understand what relationship this has to what our Council for Post-Secondary Education holds our college and universities accountable for. And certainly Jennifer, Michael, and Chase for updating us on what's happening at the Kentucky Department of Education. Thanks to all. Again, I will remind you that this webinar does serve as meeting the requirement of your education prep program for the fall requirement regarding Senate Bill 1. We have taped the seminar and recorded it, and we will have it posted on the website that your EPP has if you want to listen to it again. Thank you very much, and we will sign off now and have a great Friday afternoon. Thank you all. Practice was good. Practice was good. It helped us. I will send this revised PowerPoint to everyone, and any handouts I will send.